Hello, welcome to the 24-25 season of the Palm Beach Symphony. We've put together what I think is a very exciting program for you. And let me first begin by talking about our first program. When you make the first program of the season, you want it to be something special. It's not to say that all the others aren't going to be special, but it has to be celebratory. It has to be, this is the beginning of the year. This has to be something in a way for everyone to celebrate our great orchestra, our great community, our great concert hall. So the first piece on the program is by Ellen Zwillich. Now many of you will remember Ellen Zwillich from the work that she wrote last year called Orchestral Excursions, that were dedicated to Gil Maurer, commissioned by Bonnie McElveen Hunter. She wrote this absolutely gorgeous piece with Gil's artwork in the background. And it gave me an idea that maybe we should take from that example of last season and build on it for this year. So this is what I did. I start the program with the Celebration Overture by Ellen Zwillich. Ellen wrote this piece in 1984 to celebrate the opening of the new concert hall, or renovated concert hall, in Indianapolis. When you write a piece that's for a new concert hall, it's a test piece. You want to hear the louds, you want to hear the softs, you want to hear it really high, you want to hear it low, you want to hear it fast, and it has to be celebratory. So that's exactly what she did. She took a little motive, which is, I'll sing, excuse my voice, ba-dum, 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 ba-dum. That's a very active mode. It just moves like crazy, and you can just feel the energy. And then contrasting to that, she writes these gorgeous melodies for every member of the orchestra, especially some solos, a solo for the violin, a solo for the viola, a solo for the cello, a solo for the double bass, a solo for the piccolo and the flute, a solo for the horn. Lots of solos in different registers. I mean, think about it. How many pieces do you know that have a double bass solo? Not that many, but she wanted to test the hall in a kind of exciting way. And so in a way, what she is doing in this piece is taking the tradition of great American orchestral music and pushing it forward. Where is this taking us? How is this hall going to move forward for Indianapolis? Ellen and I go back many years because we were at school together. She's from Florida. She went to Florida State. And for her graduate degree, she went to Juilliard. And when she was a graduate student, I had just entered the school and we became fast friends. She played the violin and she played the trumpet, and I helped prepare one of her early pieces for the great Pierre Boulez to conduct at Juilliard. And we met actually when she came to my practice room and wanted me to read through a trumpet quartet for her with some of my friends. So that we did. Since then, I've done so many pieces of Ellen's. I've commissioned so many pieces. She's just been remarkable. Then with her great violin playing, she joined the American Symphony, which was conducted by Leopold Stokowski. At pretty much the same time I joined playing first trumpet in the American Symphony. So we spent 6 or 7 years playing together in the American Symphony before I joined the New York Philharmonic. She's among the most extraordinary musicians I know, one of the great composers alive today, anywhere. The next work on the program is probably the greatest cello concerto ever written by Antonin Dvorak. Dvorak spent 3 years living in New York in the late 19th century. He was the head of the National Conservatory. He came here, quite frankly, for money. I mean, that's not a horrible thing to say. He wanted to make sure at his older age that he would be able to support his family after his passing. And so he came to New York, spent 3 years. They paid him exceptionally well. He spent his summers in Spillville, Iowa, because there was a Czech enclave in Spillville where they spoke Czech, and they were all expatriates from Czechoslovakia. And he was very homesick. He was very, very committed to Bohemia and to what we know is to be the Czech Republic now. He wrote some extraordinary pieces while he was in New York. 4 of his most popular. He wrote his 9th Symphony, the New World Symphony. He wrote his American String Quartet and String Quintet, and he wrote this great cello concerto. Interestingly, cello concertos were not that popular. The great concertos were always written for piano or violin. there are some cello concertos. Obviously, Sanson wrote one that he might have known. Brahms never wrote a specific cello concerto. He wrote a double concerto for cello and violin. When Brahms saw the score to the cello concerto, he said, "This is extraordinary. Why haven't I written one?" Brahms and Dvorak were very close. It is thought that the reason he came up with the idea of the cello concerto was because he heard a cello concerto by Victor Herbert. Victor Herbert, Irish, emigrated to the United States, played principal cello in the Metropolitan Opera Orchestra, became quite famous for his operettas, for his light works, like Babes in Toyland was one of his operettas. And Brahms heard his second cello concerto and supposedly gave him the idea to write one on his own, which he did. And it is a magnificent work in 3 movements, poignant, beautiful, an incredible opening tutti. Now, what does that mean? Most concertos begin with the orchestra playing all the material. You play the opening theme, then the horn comes in as a solo playing the secondary theme. The whole time, the poor soloist is sitting there waiting to come in. Now, sometimes, like in the Tchaikovsky first piano concerto, the piano plays chords, so the soloist is getting a little warm up while the orchestra plays the tunes. Sometimes, like in the Beethoven fourth concerto, the piano actually plays the opening part. But of course, within a minute or two, the pianist has to sit there for 3 or 4 minutes while the orchestra plays the opening, what we call tutti, the opening work for the whole orchestra. I'm very excited to do this piece, which I always am because I love it so much, but in particular because my son, our son, Jody, and my son, Julian, is a soloist. Julian is one of the great cellists playing before the public today. He won a big international competition in Hong Kong. He won a Chamber Music Prize in Boulder, Colorado. He is playing concerts all over the world. Jennifer Higdon, a composer who we will be featuring in a subsequent concert, is writing a concerto for him. I think he already has 12 concerto appearances with that concerto. And working with your son it is a little different, and it is very much the same. So Julian knows this piece. He's practiced this piece. He understands this piece. He brings it to me, and I then listen to him. And in the case of Julian, I just basically do what he wants because it's what I want. With soloists and conductors, sometimes there is a little interchange. I can say, well, would you consider this? Or maybe if it's slower than I would like or faster, I just do what the soloist wants. But working with your son, it's so remarkable to think that as a father, you can actually do something with a child. It's probably not dissimilar from my grandfather on my father's side, who was a medical doctor, and then his son, my father, became a medical doctor. So it's passing the torch in a sense. After the intermission, we're doing the famous Mussorgsky Pictures in an Exhibition, as arranged or orchestrated, I should say, by Maurice Ravel. This has a complicated history in a sense because it was written as a piano work for solo piano in 1874. 1873, the great architect, watercolorist, line drawer named Victor Hartmann died at a very young age, and he was a close friend of Mussorgsky's. There was a critic then named Stasov who organized a showing of, after he died, of all of these works that were in existence of Hartmann. Mussorgsky went to the exhibition, was incredibly impressed, and he decided to take 10 of the pictures and write music to them. So one is the Great Gate of Kiev, one is the chicks in their shell, one is gnomes, one is, there are so many, the old castle, and there's just so many pictures that he actually wrote music to, piano music. Most of those pictures are lost, a few are left, but then in between these 10 movements of these 10 pictures, he wrote 5 promenades. So this is the idea. You walk into a gallery, and that's the promenade. Then you see a painting. That's the picture. Then you move to the next picture. That's another promenade. Now, sometimes after you walk in a museum or a gallery, you see 2 or 3 pictures in a row before you make the next promenade. So there are 5 promenades and 10 movements. We had the idea, wouldn't it be wonderful to take contemporary and old art and display it on a huge screen behind the orchestra? Not Hartman's pictures, but rather pictures by contemporary painters, or in some cases, antiquity. I worked with a remarkable curator at the Low Art Museum at the University of Miami, Jill Dupuy. And Jill has an extraordinary knowledge of everything to do with art. I mean, from antiquity to the present day. I had some ideas of my own because I'm a great art lover, and so between us, but especially with Jill, we commissioned or chose something like 40 works. Now, you don't want to have too many pictures because it's distracting. So you have a promenade, and here's one, if you can see it. Can you see that one? This is by Arthur Sims. This is a promenade. As you can see, Arthur Sims's painting is someone walking, or in this case, it's a sculpture. Arthur Sims is, I think, from Jamaica. He lives in New York City. I can show you a couple of more promenades just to get a gist of what that's like. Here, we have 3 more promenades, 3 more paintings. This one is by Omar Ba, Senegalian painter who lives in Paris and New York. This one is as you can see, is a shoe. What could be more appropriate? Claudia de Monte, who lives in Miami and in New York. And this one is Karen Lamont. Now this one's really, you can see it's a promenade, but it's all made of glass. It's an extraordinary, it's actually a wedding dress that was commissioned by Becky Benaroya, who's a dear friend of Jody's and mine in Seattle when we were building Benaroya Hall, and Karen is a close friend of hers. Now, for example, for the Great Gate of Kiev, the last movement, this you'll love. This is Michel Opidona. Now, Michel, can you see that okay? Was commissioned to do the floor in the Miami airport. So if you walk on, I think it's American Airlines, and look down, you'll see this kind of existing floor that she was commissioned to do. So she gave us a couple of photographs, a couple of slides of the floor, and we use it for the Great Gate of Kiev. You get the idea. And then Jill picked a lot of works from the Low Art Museum, again, from history, and then some artists who aren't alive, but most of the artists are living. A couple of them by Claudia de Monte and Ed McGowan, they actually created for us. Quite remarkable. Now, Ed's one is the chicks in their shell, so that's a painting this big. But when you see it at Kravis, it's the whole back wall. I mean, but there are not so many that is distracting, which is to say, it's a music concert, it's not an art exhibit. So the music has to be in the forefront at the same time. The art, we believe, since it was conceived that way, enhances your appreciation of the music. Again, not dissimilar from what Ellen Zwillich did with Gil Maurer and some of his watercolors last season. So I think I'm extremely excited about this concert between Dvorak and Zwillich, and of course Mussorgsky, Ravel. Now, where does Ravel come in? I should mention that. Serge Koussevitzky, who was one of the greatest conductors of the 20th century, longtime music director of the Boston Symphony in the middle of the century, he was a Russian double bass player, right? Was one of the few solo. He actually wrote a concerto for double bass. That was quite good. That is quite good. He had a series of concerts in Paris called the Koussevitzky Concerts. And in 1922, he commissioned Maurice Ravel, the great French composer, maybe among the handful of the greatest orchestrators of all time. Now, what does that mean? That means the way he puts his notes into the orchestra is ingenious, brilliant, colorful. I'll talk more about that when we get to his Dathis and Chloe later in the season. So Koussevitzky commissioned Ravel to do an orchestration, to take the piano notes of Mussorgsky and put them in the orchestra. That has become one of the staples of the standard repertoire of orchestras all over the world. It's a beautiful piece, beautifully orchestrated. So here we have a concert that, as I said before, I'm extremely excited about, and I look forward to seeing you at Kravis to witness the opening of the 24-25 season.